Welcome back. This is Alfred Weber. We're with the Reverend Kevin Annett, who is the acting secretary for the International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State. Kevin is now in New York, where he and other concerned members have been carrying out various public actions, including at the Government of Ontario. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks for having me again, Alfred.
Yeah, can you give us an update? Today's March 1st, 2012. Can you give us an update on exactly what has been going on in New York City and what the purpose of all of these activities are?
Sure. Well, I'm in New York City now. I've been invited by a couple of groups here who are survivors of Catholic Church rape, and we've been gathering, holding public rallies and meetings in several community television stations here in New York. There's tremendous interest in about the genocide of Native children in Canada, and also I've been approached by a number of Native groups here in the eastern part of the U.S. to help them in their work to start the same process. They were very interested when they saw our YouTube about the Mohawk residential school in Brantford, Ontario, and how we're beginning to excavate the remains of children there with the support of the elders. And so they want to start a similar process here, picking up with a number of the Occupy New York to plan events on May 1st, where we plan to converge on the Canadian in New York City, St. Patrick's Cathedral as a symbol of the Roman Catholic Church, and then on to the United Nations. We're going to be demanding that criminal sanctions be brought against these churches and the government of Canada for these crimes against humanity, against Native kids, and ongoing crimes against children. So it's very encouraging to see the kind of support we're getting here in New York City.
Now, we also received a bulletin of breaking news that another independent search for Native children's remains has begun in Ontario, Canada, and more revelations and attempted sabotage at the Mohawk Indian residential school in Cree. Could you go into some detail on that?
Yes, definitely. If listeners might remember, last October and November, we began station of 9 elders of the two of the clans there on the Mohawk of the Grand River near Brantford, Ontario. They invited me in to survey the grounds and to work with archaeologists to help begin to do test digs near some of the sites of these mass graves where eyewitnesses described burying children near the... now, this is the oldest Indian boarding school in Canada. It's the Mohawk Institute set up by the Church of England, the Crown of England, and the Vatican back in 1982. It didn't close till the 1970s, and about between a third and a half of these children died in the school. So we were invited to come and survey there. After seeing the postings we made on YouTube about the dig, I was contacted by elders of the Cree Nation in Northern Ontario, and they've asked not to be identified yet, including the name of the school where they're working, but they have decided to go ahead based on what the Mohawks have been doing with me. Just this week, they began their own test dig and surveys on the grounds of a fairly old residential school in Northern Ontario. Second Native Nation now that have decided to say, look, we're not going to trust the government-funded Truth and Reconciliation Committee. It's a whitewash. They don't have the powers to investigate or prosecute the churches for these crimes. So we're going to do it on our own. And this is really encouraging because they're taking action directly in their own name to bring home their children for a proper burial. And the Cree in their communique have also said that they want to work with our ITCCS to take what they find to European human rights courts to indict Canada and the Crown of England for genocide. So this is a really encouraging development. It happened at the same time that there's been another attempt to divide the elders in Brantford. There's a number of people in the area who work for the government. They're Native people in name, and they've been doing kind of a smear campaign and attempt to divide the elders so that they don't support the dig we're doing, and they try to get them to dissociate themselves from me and the ITCCS. So now that we're bringing this out and other Native people are taking the same kind of action, we're confident that we'll get around that, and we're looking forward to the upcoming months where we can continue these excavations and, the investigation.
Well, it seems to me that more and more every day, more is coming out, evidence is coming out that the not only the discrimination, but a sustained program of institutional genocide against Aboriginal people in Canada by the government of Canada is coming out. And this just occurred today in mainstream Canadian media, which I'd like to pass on to you for comment, because you may not have heard it, being as you're in New York City. Today, I happen to be listening to the CBC News, Anna Maria Tremonti, and she was speaking with an Aboriginal woman who's head of I don't remember the exact name, but it's a society for the protection of Aboriginal children, and she's monitoring the process at the United Nations, which is looking into the Aboriginal community's complaint at the UN that the government of Canada is discriminating against Aboriginal children and Aboriginals and not protecting them. And what this woman reported on CBC at length was that because she is monitoring what the United Nations is doing to be able to pass it on to her community and to the Aboriginal community, she has found that the government of Canada, some covert agency, is monitoring her movements and her communications. And she stated that not only is this illegal, but it appears that the government of Canada is more concerned with protection of itself than with remediating what the international community, in terms of the United Nations, now has found, that indeed, by objective standards, the government of Canada is discriminating against and carrying out programs against the Aboriginal community. Do you have any comment now that this is beginning to surface on places like the CBC?
Well, it's an indication, Alfred, of how deep the rot goes and how much it's coming out now that even the CBC, which is an arm of the government, is forced to make a comment on it. What she's describing, I encounter every day. In Vancouver, where I do a lot of work, it's not unusual for Native mothers to show up and talk to me and say that social services, the Minister of Children and Families, have taken their children without warning, and she hasn't seen her kids in months. There's no review allowed. She can't see a lawyer. They're like non-citizens when it comes to the rights of protecting their own children. She was breastfeeding one of her kids, and she didn't even know where the child was. And this is very normal. It's the norm when it comes to do with the state's handling of Native children and families, because their plan is genocide. They continue the process of destroying Native families, allowing deculturalization, loss of language, criminalizing children at a young age so that they can then be incarcerated later, to profit the government in their prison system. All of that is part of, what we're talking about, a system of legal apartheid and genocide in Canada. So the fact that she's being monitored and followed by Canada is a way to discourage other people from coming forward. We encounter that all the time with the work we do. All she has to do is keep being public and vocal. And at the United Nations here in New York, of course, they tend to protect. And when you said that, it's all about protecting themselves, very much that's the purpose of the so-called Truth and Reconciliation Commission, why they don't allow people to name names, why they don't allow people to use the evidence at the TRC to prosecute the churches. All of that is set up to protect the perpetrators, because it goes very high. It goes right to the Vatican. Stephen Harper himself is a member of a church that continues to fund residential schools in Africa, where they're doing exactly to African kids what happened to Indian kids in Canada. So all of this is an indication, and I just think it shows how quickly the cards are all falling. And, we just have to keep up the pressure exposing all this stuff.
Well, your evidence at the ITCCS indicates that this goes right to the head of state of Canada. In other words, the monarchy, in other words, Elizabeth of Windsor and her consort. And I and I wondered if you could describe again for those listeners who may not have heard of it, how you have evidence that the head of state of Canada, the Queen of England, in fact came to British Columbia and may have engaged in genocidal acts herself, personally, against Aboriginal children.
Well, we know from Buckingham Palace records, which were up online until a while ago, that the Queen and Prince Philip did come to Canada in October 1964. They were on an official state visit in eastern Canada, but there was an 11-day period when they were in the country, so it would be easy for her to have been elsewhere. And we have from an eyewitness who died this last year, William Coombs. He claims that in the same month, October 1964, he was a child at a 12-year-old at the Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia, run by the Catholic Church. He claims that he saw the Queen and Prince Philip show up unescorted, just with a couple of aides, and take the children down to a place called Dead Man's Creek where they had a picnic, and then 10 children left in the company of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip and were never seen again. They were 7 boys and 3 girls, and William says they vanished and never came back. For the rest of their lives, they were never seen again. Now, William was prepared to give his statement at the ITCCS tribunal we were organizing in London. He died suddenly. Basically, what happened was he was forced to go to St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver, a Catholic hospital, and a coma was induced in him, and he was pulled off life support in less than 48 hours, which was completely unusual and wrong for a doctor to have done that. So, his death certificate said that it was tuberculosis he died of when he had no symptoms of TB. This kind of thing is common when they kill natives in Canada, but that definitely was a way that they got rid of the eyewitness. And nevertheless, we have his statement on video, and we're going to be using that in our tribunal.
What is the consensus or evaluation of what may have occurred to those 10 children?
We have no idea. There's been different ideas suggested, but we know that not just the royal family, but very high members of the government and the churches took Native children on a regular basis for purposes of child trafficking, sex, even more heinous crimes. We know that what's interesting is lots of church officials and government officials, including Jean Chrétien, adopted Native children for who knows what reason. So this was common for child trafficking to go on. For the Crown of England to be doing it, I just think indicates that they feel themselves to be above any accountability and above the law.
Yeah. There were a series of experiments by psychologist Stanley Milgram of the psychology department at Yale University, and the title of the experiments were Obedience to Authority. And those experiments showed that, by and large, human beings, with certain exceptions, that human beings are willing to inflict pain and even death on other persons if they're ordered to do so by authority, even though they know that they're inflicting pain and even death on, they think that they're inflicting pain and even death on other persons, and that would normally be against their, quote, conscience. But if authority tells them to do so, they will do that. Yeah. And here you have the head of state, the Queen, who is also supposedly the personification of all virtue in Canada, and so propagandized by the government of Canada, specifically the Harper government. Is it any surprise that we have this endemic genocidal institutional programs against Aboriginals and against Aboriginal children in Canada if this is what the monarchy does?
Well, that's exactly right, Alfred. And don't forget that in Canada, a number of times Native lawyers working with residential school survivors have tried since 1998 to bring court cases charging the Crown of England with genocide. And every time, that happened 3 times that I'm aware of, in Alberta and Ontario and New Brunswick Supreme Court. Every time the court ruled that the issue was ultra vires or beyond their jurisdiction to rule on the culpability of the Crown for these crimes. Now, that's what the international community says. When you exhaust the legal remedies in your own country, then you should go to international courts of justice. That's proven that Native people cannot name things for what they are and indict the main actors in genocide in Canadian courts. We have to go outside the country. That's the rationale behind our International Tribunal. I want to remind people they can see the work of our tribunal at ITCCS.org, and they can read all of this evidence we're talking about at hiddennolonger.com, and that includes our film Unrepentant.
Right. Now, you mentioned earlier in our conversation today the issue of the Vatican, and I wondered if you could explain how the Vatican is connected to all these crimes.
Well, the Vatican is central to all of these crimes. They authorized them originally in papal laws in the 1400s. They sanctioned the creation of the Indian boarding schools all over North America. The Protestant churches and the governments copied the Catholic model for the genocide. And the Pope himself, Joseph Ratzinger, is personally implicated in not only ordering the cover-up of these crimes in against children, but actually helped devise a policy called Crimen Solicitanus that ordered priests and bishops to conceal from the police any evidence of the rape of children in their parishes anywhere in the world. So the Pope's opened himself up for major charges of obstructing justice and crimes against humanity. And that's, in fact, what legal groups that we're working with here in the States are trying to do. There was a group in the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York and that have been meeting with us. They have brought a case already in the International Criminal Court against Joseph Ratzinger. So these are the kinds of things to show the Vatican is personally, and the Pope is personally, and the Vatican is institutionally the main actor in this crime of genocide going back over 500 years, and just on this continent. And that also includes the Crown of England, which is a subsidiary of the Vatican under the Treaty of Verona in 1213.
Now, over the past month, 6 weeks, there have been all sorts of media leaks that Pope Ratzinger, the current Pope, is thinking of leaving, thinking of retiring. There's all sorts of kind of horse race speculation now of which cardinals are papabili, i.e., who's going to step into the shoes of Peter. How do you view these media rumors in the light of the ITCCS proceedings?
Well, I believe that they're creating, as they often do, a lot of distraction and smoke and mirrors to, develop sympathy for the guilty parties, to confuse people as to what their plan is. There was a rumor that Ratzinger would retire in April on his 84th birthday, or is it 85? I'm not sure, but. All of that, the reality is it might be a mistake to focus too much on the person. He's a figurehead. He is personally implicated and should be put on trial. But don't forget, we're talking about the Curia, the College of Cardinals, and the various other cardinals have been indicted and named in indictments as being complicit in these crimes as well. So we're talking about the whole institution. And that's why we say to people that they have no right to be tax exempt in these countries anywhere in the world. They have no right to have financial concordats with the governments of the world that siphons off tax monies in every country off to the Vatican Bank. Those things should be canceled, and the institution needs to be put on trial. So I think we should keep that in perspective, too.
Now, there is a very famous, quote, prophecy called the Prophecy of St. Malachi. People can look it up on the internet on Wikipedia, for example, and that some people have interpreted saying, if you parse it all down, it comes down to that Joseph Ratzinger is the next to the last pope. Do you put any stock in things like that? Specifically,
well, I mean, I think the thing about prophecies is you're not sure where they're coming from and who they're serving.
Yeah. And
I think we have to avoid anything which might detract from the culpability of the Vatican. It's the oldest corporation in the world and the most blood-covered, and it's responsible for enormous crimes all over the world. And I think we can't let regardless of the prophecies or the various ideas of what's going to happen, we can't lose sight of that and let go of our pursuit of justice.
Right. Finally, what do you hope to come out of your visit to New York today, and what are the most significant things that either have happened and that you expect to happen during your visit?
Well, our immediate perspective is to build for the period at the end of April and early May, when there will be a convergence of groups involved with Occupy the Vatican and Occupy Wall Street, who are joining forces to put the focus now on the Vatican as one of the chief corporations responsible for the international banking system. A lot of the stuff the Occupy movement around the world is attacking, we're naming the Vatican as part of that whole corporate oligarchy running the planet. And so there will be church occupations, there will be teach-ins, there will be a lot of media interviews are being lined up here. There's a thing called Manhattan Neighborhood Network, MNN, which is the TV network covering a lot of this stuff, and we're covering our protests. And, we're linking up with all sorts of groups, so it's very encouraging. There's a lot of groundswell of protests here in America because of, the recent police state laws brought in by Obama. And so, there's a lot of hope there at the end of April and early May. We're going to launch this Occupy the Vatican movement, and after that, in early May, I'm then going back to Europe, to Rome and other places, to work with people. So it'll be a springboard for that kind of thing as well. And again, I remind people to follow our work at hiddennolonger.com and ITCCS.org. And I'll certainly keep you posted, Alfred, about all the new developments.
Funny, how can people, listeners, get involved if they really want to support this effort?
Well, they can contact me. First of all, get educated on this, hiddennolonger.com. Read all the facts of genocide. Help set up a group in your neighborhood and community that'll take action with Occupy the Vatican. We're going to be organizing protests outside and inside churches, demanding that the tax-exempt status of these churches be revoked, the Anglican United Church and Catholic Church in Canada, and join our network. You can contact me directly at hiddenfromhistory1, like the number 1, hiddenfromhistory1@gmail.com. And please I will come to your community and help you with this, just like I'm doing here in New York and all over.
Well, thank you very much for this update. We've been with the Reverend Kevin Annett, acting Secretary of the International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State, www.ITCCS.org. This is Alfred Weber. May you have a wonderful day and expect a miracle. Thank you.